Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Thyroid Hotline. I am Missy Beavers. I am a nutritionist. I have a master's degree in nutrition. I specialize in gut and thyroid health. And I'm joined here today by my friend Stacey Price. She's also a success coach in my program, the Healthy Thyroid System. Hi, Stacey.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Also, not pictured, we have a lot of sisters here on the call who are joining us live, who will be dropping questions as we're chatting over our topic today, which is going to be air hunger. Ooh, I wish I had like something dramatic to play for that.
For
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. Because I have been talking recently on Instagram with my posts about air hunger, and we have got some incredible engagement, meaning we're getting tons of comments, tons of DMs. We have hit on a symptom that so many of you struggle with. And doctors are not aware of this, and they're not aware of how it connects with the thyroid. Both Stacey and I have dealt with this. So this is a
Yes.
symptom that we are so aware of, and one that many of you are unfortunately familiar with. And it's the symptom like you can't get a deep breath in. So I'll describe it for me, Stacey, and I'd love to hear how it feels for you. And sisters that are here, please drop in the comments if your experience is different or share your experience because I want to hear about it. But for me, when I was in the thick of my thyroid problems, air hunger was a daily thing for me. And it feels like the inability to get a breath in. So it felt like there's a like a dinosaur, an elephant sitting on my chest where I could inflate my lungs partway and then it would just stop. And for me, it felt like grabbing at my neck and fighting to, and I would even reposition my chest, trying to get more air in, but it would just stop. And so I would explain this to my doctors and they would listen to my lungs, they would listen to my heart, they would do chest x-rays. I saw cardiologists, I saw pulmonologists. It was diagnosed as asthma for a long time, and I was given inhalers, which made things worse. I was also diagnosed with anxiety because then they said, oh, yes, that's a classic anxiety symptom. You can't get this deep breath in. You're just in a panic mode. And then oftentimes the solution would be to just take deep breaths. You just need to take deep breaths,
Hmm.
which is impossible to do when you can't take deep breaths.
That's
So,
right.
yes, that is my experience with air hunger. Stacey, will you share what it's felt like to you?
Yeah, and especially I've been experiencing it lately with the things that I've been going through in my health. But yeah, it's this desperate need for air. And when you take a breath, you're just not getting enough. So I just get this feeling of anxiety like in my lungs, in my chest. I'm not having an anxiety attack. I know what that is, but the feeling of being scared to not get a deep breath. And so this will happen when I'm sitting. I'm not doing anything. There's no reason for me to be out of breath, and I'll just have to stop. I'll have to do deep breaths. Not that it feels like I can get a deep breath, but that's what I have to do. And I just have to wait for it to pass. But it comes and goes, and there's no warning. And then all of a sudden, I can't get a deep breath, and it's scary.
Very scary. And it feels like you're suffocating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a sister that says, I think mine is different. I will take a sudden gulp of air as as I forget to breathe.
Yeah.
As
Like you
as
forgot to
if
breathe.
I forget to breathe, yeah.
Yes, I resonate with that.
Yeah.
To me, it also feels like when I do get that deep breath, it feels like after you've had like a really strong sobbing cry and then you're like
Yeah.
that feeling. Yes, it feels
Mhm.
like you finally can get a deep breath in after you've had this massive cry. So
Yeah.
as you were talking, Stacey, it reminded me of I want to share this story because this is where I really got into investigating this. So I
Mhm.
was diagnosed with hypothyroidism at 8 years old. And this was one of my main symptoms in the sense that I wasn't getting air in, and doctors diagnosed asthma, and I wasn't able to participate in sports, and I wasn't able to do things with the other kids because I couldn't breathe. And I would get lightheaded and dizzy. And so, like I said, they were doing all these different diagnoses. It kind of went away for a while, but then it would come back, go away, come back. So now, fast forward, I'm in my mid 20s, and my husband gets diagnosed with leukemia, and we get whisked away. I mean, he got diagnosed one day, and then we moved to Stanford the next, which is 3 hours away. So, with the clothes on my back, we now move to a hospital and we're living there. Talk about massive stress, right? Now, I did have my thyroid meds with me. So I was taking my thyroid meds, and we're now living at Stanford. Well, he had a bone marrow transplant and we had to live there for 4 months. So they got us a studio apartment. Our home in California where we live has 2 steps. The studio apartment had 10 stairs to get up to the studio. Not a big deal. I was a healthy, functioning person. My husband had a bone marrow transplant and could climb these 10 steps. Do you know who couldn't? Me. So as the months are going on, we're climbing these 10 steps, and we had to check in at the doctors every day. So we're going down and up the stairs a couple times a day, and I was suffocating. So couldn't get the deep breath in. And I remember one time helping my husband up the stairs he had an IV bag that I had to carry behind him. And here is post-transplant human going up these stairs and non-post-transplant human that can't make it up. And we made it into the apartment, and I fell onto the couch, and I was just struggling to get this air in. And it scared me so badly that I didn't have a doctor nearby, but I contacted my doctor actually in Utah. She helped me get some labs, and my thyroid was quote unquote fine. And all of my labs were quote unquote fine. But she's a naturopath. And so she said, there's some stuff going on with your adrenals here, and this is what we need to focus on. So that opened up this whole new cascade of research study for me in how the adrenals play a critical role in our breathing. But it's not just the adrenals, it's the adrenals and thyroid connected. So it's that cross section between the adrenals and thyroid that impacts the way that the lungs are able to work. So that's just my backstory on where I became extremely interested, and what I'm going to share today with you on how what I've learned from this has helped me relieve my air hunger, and also has helped a lot of our clients. Stacey, I see a ton of comments coming in. Do you want to add?
Yeah, let's read some comments here. So, feels daily, air gets stuck straining through my chest and throat. Feels like throat is being squeezed, diaphragm is weak, and I panic. Inhalers don't help, anxiety meds don't help. Ativan has been the only thing to calm it. It would cause anxiety, but very scary to feel like I can't get a satisfactory breath.
Yeah. Really good info there. I'm going to talk about several of those things. So that was a really fantastic comment. Thank you.
Yeah. So for me, it almost feels like my body is forgetting to breathe. That makes sense. I forget to breathe too. Sensation.
Yes.
Okay. Mine gets worse when I'm sick. I'm prone to bronchitis. Yeah. My first relevant and noticeable symptom was that I wasn't breathing, and I started to notice it was as if my body was forgetting to breathe, as if I was holding my breath. I feel that.
Yeah.
I still can't make it up a flight of stairs without losing my breath, despite climbing these every day.
Every day. Yep.
Yes.
I feel that.
Yes. My husband had to carry me upstairs even when I was pregnant, had the whole time I was pregnant with my son. And after I delivered him, got a little better until 2020 with mold and trauma and COVID.
Oh boy. So many gems are stated there. Jessica, thank you for that one. There's tons of gems stated in that comment.
Yeah. Exercise induced asthma forever.
And that one's in quotes because I think
that one's in quotes. Yeah.
I have that diagnosis, and many people get that diagnosis of, it's just exercise induced. But what gets me on that, I had that diagnosis, is it's like, you have exercise induced asthma. Also, you need to exercise. So it's like, hey, you can't breathe when you work out, but you need to work out more. Because you need to lose weight, and also you need to eat less. So it's this whole bucket of symptoms that come together with conflicting advice on how to fix it. It is so frustrating. So thank you for the comments that have come through, because you're right. You intuitively know your body, and you intuitively are telling correctly what's happening. That feeling like I forgot to breathe, I resonate with that so deeply. And I've had it too. It's this idea like you're sitting here and then suddenly you're like, whoa, have I even been breathing? What have I been doing? Like you had to cognitively tell yourself to breathe, which is not how the human body is designed. So the human body is fascinating. I love studying the human body because we have so many things that happen all the time. Even right now, as I'm talking, there are things that are automated in my body. And that's things like my heart beating, my lungs breathing, my blood pumping. All these things are automated where I don't have to think about them. So I don't have to be talking to you and cognitively being like, okay, heartbeat. Because if I did, that would just be impossible to survive, right? It's crazy how many things are happening that are not that are automated, that don't have to be consciously controlled. So our body has those things going on. And one of those big things is breathing. But that is done through a series of mechanisms. So I'm grateful for the sisters that brought up the diaphragm. That's where we're going to start talking first of all, because this is highly impacted by thyroid hormones. So as a quick review, we're talking about the thyroid because every cell in the body has a thyroid receptor on it, every single cell. So we're talking about cells in our fingers and our toes and our lungs and our diaphragm. Everywhere in the body has thyroid receptors and needs thyroid hormone. And the lungs and the diaphragm need a massive amount of thyroid hormone. Truly anything that pumps or has a muscle contraction needs thyroid hormone because that's how we produce that energy. So the diaphragm specifically, and this is research that I've been eyeball deep in and I love it. The diaphragm specifically needs T3 hormones to be able to function. So when I say T3 hormones, I'm talking about the active form of thyroid hormone. So again, another quick recap. We have our brain that sends out TSH and that tells our thyroid to make hormones. So that's actually a pituitary or a brain hormone that is going to stimulate the thyroid to make hormones. Then our thyroid that sits here in our neck makes T4. That is the precursor to the usable form. So that form T4 has to go into our gut and liver and cells to be converted to T3, which is the usable form that our diaphragm needs. So many sisters, myself included, we break down at the T4 conversion to T3 step, meaning that our thyroid might be making T4 fantastically. But if our gut and liver and cells aren't able to convert it to T3, these are where the symptoms arise. So just out of curiosity, for the sisters that are here, are any of you on a T4 medication? That would be like Tyrosine, levothyroxine, Synthroid. I always, for my own curiosity, I always love hearing that because those medications can be incredibly helpful for people who are able to convert T4 to T3. But if that's the step where we're broken, and many of us are broken there, adding in more T4 meds doesn't relieve the problems. And especially in this scenario, I can attest personally, did not fix my air hunger. Is that true for you too, Stacey?
Yes. Yeah, that's true. T4 was not never a good medication for me to be taking.
Yeah. And it, like I said, it's helpful for some people. I don't want to demonize the med, but
No, not at
for
all.
those of us that don't convert it well,
Yeah.
it doesn't relieve the problem. So what's happening with the diaphragm is so interesting. And I have a picture for those of you that are live and those of you who are watching the replay on YouTube. For those listening to the podcast, I'm going to do my best to describe this image. But the diaphragm, it sits, I'm going to explain it and then I'll show it. The diaphragm sits here below our lungs and it contracts and it relaxes. I'm using my hands first of all. So when it contracts, it pulls down and that causes the lungs to inflate. So it creates a little vacuum. So it's going to pull down and the lungs are going to then fill full of air and we are going to feel so good because we got a deep breath in and we didn't struggle and there was no fight and everything was awesome. Then as it relaxes, the air pushes out. That is how healthy breathing occurs. Well, if you have thyroid issues going on, your diaphragm may not be getting enough T3. And we heard this in a comment just a minute ago, like a weak diaphragm. And that's exactly right. The diaphragm is not contracting all the way, which means that the lungs aren't able to inflate all the way. So it is exactly the feeling that we're experiencing. It's like you can fill to a certain point and then it stops. And there's no amount of cognitive thinking or adjustment of our body that can get us to that point where the diaphragm is going to pull all that air in. So with that precursor of a statement, I'm going to show you this image. I think this is so interesting. And to our sisters that are here, let us know if you can see this. So what we're looking at is the lungs, and they are here above the diaphragm. And then something that I love talking about since I love the gut so much, and this is a little known fact, the diaphragm sits right above the stomach. So here we have the diaphragm that goes over the stomach, and then there's a little break in the diaphragm for the stomach to go through it, and then it comes around. So when the diaphragm flattens or contracts down, it's pulling the air in. It's also keeping the stomach contents closed. So that's called the stomach sphincter. And it plays a very vital role in keeping the stomach contents closed. So many sisters with thyroid issues have air hunger, and they also have acid reflux. And for those of you that are here with us, let us know if you have both of those things going on, because that is a really helpful way to know if this is diaphragm related. Because if the diaphragm is weak, it's not going to keep the stomach sphincter closed. And then we can have stomach contents spilling out into the esophagus, which creates those really uncomfortable acid sensations. I should have clarified in the beginning, this is not medical advice, so please continue to talk with your doctors. However, I see this a lot with clients where they have acid reflux and they're having air hunger. And those two things give us clues that the diaphragm likely is weak or isn't contracting the way it should. And the reason for that often goes back to thyroid hormones, meaning you don't have enough T3 to help this muscle contract. Stacey, do you want to chime in with some comments?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting, the acid reflux piece, because for the first time in my life, I'm having acid reflux and also air hunger. That's due to my liver issues right now, but that makes so much sense, and it's so simple, and it boggles my mind that it's not explained to women who are having these issues, and I wish there was more that doctors could do about this, but it is infuriating when you can't get that breath. And then, to be told it's just asthma or it's anxiety, to be put on all these medications and they don't help. And it's honestly, when you break it down like that, it seems like such a simple fix.
Yes, a simple visual fix, but we're going to talk
Yes.
more in a minute about everything that entails.
Hmm.
But yes, it's a very simple visual. And I also appreciated when I finally saw this and I connected this, I was like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
this is the problem, because I honestly thought the lungs were below the stomach. Like I didn't have a visual on this until I saw it. And then I was like, oh, wow, this explains why the gut and the thyroid and the breathing, everything flows together, because they're all right there together in the gut. We have very close, our organs are very close. They've got a close relationship.
Yeah, and I know our body is super complicated, but when you break it down like this, it's such a great explanation. And I think it just gives validation to me and probably a lot of other people.
Yeah, super. Do you have any comments you want to pop in? Are we getting anything here that we want to
We
touch on?
are. Yeah. So, Melissa says, yeah, she has both. Also, Jessica, yes, I do have GERD. I don't take any PPLs, as it wasn't helping because I felt like it was a diaphragm more than GERD.
Yep. Way to go. You were
Difficult
right.
time eating. Yeah. So,
Yep, all those things connected. I like this picture a bit better, but they didn't put the lungs in it. But this is such a clear visual that shows you how the diaphragm is there with the stomach, and then this blank area is where the lungs would be inflating.
mhm.
All right, so with this visual in mind, let's talk about then why are we not getting enough T3? Why are we not getting enough T3 into that diaphragm so the diaphragm can contract and the lungs can expand? And I did an Instagram about this last week, and some of you may have seen it. So I'll recap some of the same things I already said. But what we're really interested in is how the adrenals are functioning. So the adrenals, they're these tiny little glands. They're about the size of walnuts or almonds. I'm holding up my hands here to show. They sit on the back, on top of the kidneys. So about the middle of our back, they sit on top of the kidneys. They control a lot of really important things in the body. And what we know them most for is our fight or flight or our stress response. And I think right now on social media, they are getting a bad rap in the sense that they're really being demonized. And people talk about how stress is the root of your problem and you need to control your stress, and there's too much stress and the adrenals are stressed. And it's also tied into nervous system regulation, which the adrenals are part of the nervous system regulation. So there's a lot of great education and information out there. But the thing that I really shy away from is people are making them sound really, really bad and terrible, like something we need to suppress. We need to bring them down. They're bad. They're too bad. And whenever that happens with organs in the body, I take it personally when we demonize organs. And then I just want to scream and shout and say, no, they're doing that for a reason. And that's the message I can't be loud enough about, is that if your thyroid's not working, if your adrenals aren't working, if you're not getting a deep breath in, that's all happening for a reason. Bodies don't just fall apart for no reason. It's because they're accommodating for something else going on. So, with the adrenals specifically, yes, their job is to control our response to stress. So, within our bodies, we are exposed to things all the time. And I'm going to draw this back into the gut because this is where my interest and my education is, and where we help women overcome air hunger. So, within the gut, if we have sneaky infections, so if we develop overgrowths of yeast or bacteria or mold or viruses or parasites, if we have imbalances in the gut, we know that all disease is going to begin there. And what I love about that truth is Hippocrates said it thousands of years ago. So for thousands of years, we've known that all disease begins in the gut. But Western medicine is just catching up. And Western medicine has recently said all autoimmune disease begins in the gut. So Hashimoto's and Graves, those are the forms of thyroid autoimmune disease that many women have. And if you have that and you're here with us, drop in the comments because I'd love to hear. But Hashimoto's or Graves, those are autoimmune diseases and they begin in the gut. Well, why? Because 80% of our immune cells are made there. So if we have imbalances of those pathogens I was just talking about, immune cells aren't going to be made effectively. And then we're going to have issues with inflammation in the gut, immune responses, and things are going to get crazy. That is stressful. That is a stress inside of the body. So the adrenals are going to flip into action and they're going to be like, whoa, we've got some stress going on in our bodies. We've got inflammation. We need to take care of this. The response to that is to send out cortisol. So cortisol reduces inflammation. That is amazing. That keeps us alive. We love cortisol, assuming that it's a short-term thing. So the adrenals will send it out. They'll bring down the inflammation. Now, if that infection continues to brew long-term, the adrenals will still try to keep that inflammation down. And that translates into long-term cortisol dysregulation. So this is where we start to see on social media people demonizing cortisol. And they're saying, if your cortisol's high, you may have belly fat and you might have blood sugar issues and you may have issues with anxiety. And all these things are true. They're absolutely true. But then the next step they say is you need to reduce your cortisol. And then here's some supplements that can do it. Here's some things that you can do to reduce it. And then that's where we get more of the deep breathing and the yogas and the nervous system regulation. And all of these things are helpful. They're all incredible. And yes, they will reduce your cortisol. If you take these specific supplements, they will reduce your cortisol. But we didn't find out why the cortisol was high. So the cortisol is likely high from imbalances in the gut. And this is where the breathing comes in. So let's assume that this is happening, that there's some type of imbalance, that there was an infection and we took an antibiotic. Now we have an overgrowth of bad bacteria or yeast. We took birth control and that upset gut flora. We had the standard American diet will upset the gut. We had infections. There's all kinds of things that can create gut imbalances. And we all experience them to some degree. So we have these gut bugs that are out of balance. Our adrenals send out this cortisol because we're bringing down the inflammation. This is where the thyroid gets involved. So cortisol can actually block T3 hormones from getting into the cells. So like I was explaining earlier, we might be making T4 okay, we might be making T3 okay, but we might have cortisol blocking it from getting into the diaphragm. So now our sweet little diaphragm's like, I'm going to get a deep breath. And then it contracts part way, and then it doesn't have enough T3 or enough metabolism or energy to be able to contract the full way. And we're fighting for air.
And can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're saying we could be converting our T4 to our T3 and the cortisol is blocking it. So when we get our labs, is it showing that we do have T3 in our blood and your labs are quote unquote fine, right? That happens a lot?
Yes. We see that a lot. Thank you, Stacey, for bringing that up. We see that a lot with women in our program. And sometimes even the free T3 will be high. Like it'll be on the high end, but then you will feel low. and you can't get a deep breath in. And then doctors will say, oh, you need to lower your thyroid dose because your T3 is high. And this, I went through this, where then we would lower my thyroid dose and it would be even worse. So this is in the beginning stages of some type of infection, inflammation. Now, I didn't even touch on the brain part of this, but the brain part of this does play a role in the sense that our mental stressors or things that we're experiencing in our life, absolutely, they can trigger the stress response just as easily as an infection. So there is a place, absolutely, for the things that we've been talking about for, breathing and yoga and meditation and calming your thoughts, and all of those great things we read about with nervous system regulation are very important. But we have to keep in mind that there are body stressors and there's mental stressors and there's environmental stressors. You might be living in an environment that's very moldy or has a lot of chemicals or is near farmland and there's all kinds of sprays that are being sprayed. So we've got different forms of quote unquote stressors that are in us, around us, on us, live with us, people, pets, all these things. And so I get a little inflamed when I read things on social media or I hear different practitioners that just say, you just need to manage your stress. You just need to manage your stress. And I think the reason I get so triggered by that is because in the depths of what I was telling you about after my husband's transplant, when I was seeing different practitioners, that's what they would say. Your husband just had a bone marrow transplant. It's a very stressful time for you. You need these anti-anxiety, anti-depression medications. I'm not going to fight them on that. I haven't been through a bigger stress prior or post to a bone marrow transplant. It was very stressful, but it wasn't the only thing going on. And I think to discount it as it made me feel like I was incapable of managing what was happening in my life, and where I could physically feel that there was something physically inside of me that wasn't capable of working. Have you had that experience, Stacey?
Yeah. Yeah. We all go through the stresses and then, you'll ask about all these symptoms that are going on. And well, you've just been through this. You have to understand, your body's going to take a while to recover, or it's a stressful situation. Or, yeah, I mean, I had an issue with my cycle stopping. I'm only 46. And the nurse said, oh, yay, maybe you're in menopause. I'm like, no. The stress didn't put me in menopause. There's actually a physical reason in my body why I'm not having a cycle. So it's just, it does feel discounting. It feels like there's something wrong with you, like you're doing it, like you need to handle this better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. So we have a question here though. She's saying, so are you saying adrenals can cause panic disorder?
Adrenals play a huge role in that. Absolutely. And again, I'm not a doctor and I can't comment on diagnoses, nor is this medical advice. But we often see clients with these diagnoses of panic disorders or depression or any type of dysregulation of the nervous system and neurotransmitters. And yes, it's tied to what's happening in the gut and what's happening with the adrenals. And those two, they go together. So, like I was explaining, the adrenals are trying to keep whatever's happening in the body from becoming a wildfire. And they do that well by putting out cortisol. Now, let's talk about the flip side of that. So, that is one mechanism that can cause air hunger is your cortisol is too high and it's suppressing T3 from being able to even get to the diaphragm or helping that lung tissue expand. That's one mechanism. Now, over time, if those infections continue to brew, and I am the perfect case of this because I'm talking decades for me, just a quick backstory. So I was diagnosed at 8, and I know now it's because I lived in a very moldy environment, and I also had a lot of infections as a kid. So I took a lot of antibiotics. I had mold exposure. I had the perfect storm of the things that were happening. So I had this autoimmune disease at 8 years old. Well, then fast forward to my 14th year, and I had strep constantly. I would get strep, I would take antibiotics, I would get strep again, I would take antibiotics. And this went on for a full year. So I took antibiotics for an entire year. And it was after that we found out my dad was a carrier. So he was just passing that around unknowing without any symptoms. But once he was treated, I never got it again, which was fabulous. But that constant antibiotic train for me upset so much in my body. And it allowed that strep bacteria to take up a residence in my gut. So now here I am another decade beyond that. And my adrenals have been trying to keep these sneaky little pathogens under control for decades. Decades. They're trying to keep my immune system balanced, right? So what happens then, and we see this more often, I think, than we see high cortisol, is over time, those pathogens can then suppress the adrenals from working. So the adrenals can be overworking, and then over time, those pathogens stop the cortisol from being made adequately or accurately. And then we start to see adrenal hormones on the flip side, where now they're too low. And this is sometimes called adrenal fatigue, which I have been guilty of using that term in the past. And I still sometimes will say it, but I don't love that term because the adrenals aren't tired. They're actually suppressed. And I like that just on a mindset level because a fatigued organ makes it sound like you're going to have to stimulate it. You have to come in and really just ramp it up and just, cow prod it to make it work. That's not the truth at all. It's that they're insufficient in the sense that they're suppressed by pathogens. And the mistake that I've made in the past and a lot of practitioners make is when we see a suppressed adrenal, we're like, oh, let's stimulate it. Let's give it these herbs and these supplements. And sometimes doctors even do steroids to make them work, right? It's like, get to work. You're tired. Work, work, work. And for some of our sisters, they'll feel good. They'll take a steroid after years of experiencing this, and they'll be like, oh, this is how regular people feel. Because it will make the adrenals, it will stimulate them to make hormones. But we didn't find out why they weren't making hormones. So the flip side of this, if you are underproducing adrenal hormones or adrenal insufficiency, you will have the identical symptoms. And I maybe demonized cortisol as a reason that T3 can't get into the cells. But on the flip side, if you don't have enough adrenal hormones, you're going to have the same problem where your T3 doesn't convert well and can't get into the diaphragm, can't be utilized by muscle tissue, and you're not able to breathe. So this is why I am such a huge fan of testing, because the symptoms can be identical. You could have air hunger on the high end or the low end. And this is where we need to do deeper testing than just looking at TSH, because TSH won't tell us that. And as we talked about, even free T3 and free T4 can be deceptive. So I like to add in more labs on top of that. And then I also like to look at the gut, because with the testing we use the organic acids test. And this test can tell us what pathogens might be creating issues, and also gives us a view of the adrenals. So we can say, okay, are the adrenals performing well? Are they able to do their job of facilitating thyroid hormone delivery and also getting it into the tissue? And most times the answer is no. And that is why people have these issues with deep breaths. Stacey, do you want to hop in with questions? I see some coming in.
Yeah, I was told it was my babesia, mold, etc.
Yes.
Treatment with herbs have made me worse. We hear that a lot, but I know my gut is worse. I've been trying adrenal glandular, IgG, and butyrate within last 2 months and noticing some change, but not enough change. Still constipated and still going through it. Steroids gave me anxiety.
Fabulous. That is a case that we are very familiar with, cases like that where you have Lyme, you have co-infections of mold, you're dealing with, like you said, adrenal stimulants, and then having the backside of that of having anxiety. Thank you for sharing that. We see a lot of cases like this. And you've got a great protocol, and it sounds like you're working with a good practitioner. So I highly recommend working with a practitioner that is aware of the adrenal impact on, well, the gut's impact on the adrenals and the adrenals impact on the thyroid, because that's really important. And we use some of those same things in our program. I'm not going to comment on supplements because they are very individualized. And we don't know until we see testing what could be helpful for some sisters or for others. Do you want to add in others before I talk about electrolytes?
No, we're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So the one thing I can talk about safely as a nutritionist are electrolytes. And this is a very simple thing that we have our sisters in our program try out and work on while we are waiting for deeper solutions, and even afterward, depending on what's going on. So if you have adrenal insufficiency, like we were talking about, or even if you're overproducing cortisol, what that does is it messes with your electrolytes. So the hormones that the adrenals produce, they will tell your kidneys whether they're going to hold on to sodium and potassium or whether they're going to pee them out. So depending on if you're high or low, you'll either hold potassium or you'll pee out potassium. So we often see varying flips of that. Some sisters will have really high potassium, low sodium, and some will have the flip. They'll have high sodium and low potassium. The more common though is low sodium, high potassium. And that is what happens when the adrenals have been suppressed for a while. We start to see that pattern happening. So if that's the case, and this is where I recommend testing. So we want to get our tests done. We want to look at these numbers. We want to see in the ranges what things look like. If there is a low sodium pattern going on with a high potassium pattern, very good clue. Very good clue that your adrenals are not producing great. We don't know why still, but we can see on the labs that, okay, we've got some electrolyte imbalances. And a really safe and simple thing to try is just to add in some sea salt. So this for me, total game changer. I was given this by a naturopath, and this was when I was in the thick of it. So that was like 13 years ago. During that time I was telling earlier where I just could not breathe. And the recommendation, which I feel comfortable giving to anyone, is to get a teaspoon of raw honey, but raw honey if possible, because raw has all the local fantastic little immune supporting things in it. But just a teaspoon of raw honey, and then you shake sea salt all over it. So that can be Himalayan, that can be kosher, that can be Celtic, sea salt. You want to do a sea salt, definitely not iodized salt, because that is going to backfire on us. So I'm not a fan of iodized table salt. Get rid of that. We want sea salt. So you'll do a teaspoon of raw honey, you sprinkle sea salt all over it. You put that in your mouth and you just hold it there. So it's going to be very salty and very sweet, and you kind of just push it around and then you swallow it. This is extremely effective for these moments of intense panic in the body, because the sugar in the honey helps stabilize the blood sugar. So that prevents some of this cortisol crazy crash. So it can stabilize a blood sugar. And then the sea salt is going to help replenish what is being peed out by the chaotic adrenal. So this is a temporary Band-Aid. This is just to get that in your body. And I know for me, when I would do that, I would be able to get a deep breath soon after. So it was something that could work immediately. And sometimes when things were really bad, in fact, when I was in that studio with my husband and I learned this trick, I would keep a little shaker of sea salt in my purse and I would just shake salt in my hand and lick it. And it's incredible how quickly that works, because then my electrolytes are balanced, which stabilizes the adrenals, which means that the thyroid hormone you do have in your body can be utilized. And that would help relieve that tension in my diaphragm and my chest. That is a short-term solution, but a lot of our sisters love that. I still use that if I experience out of the blue an experience where I can't breathe. I'll just go grab some salt, some honey, and give that trick a try. Have you tried that trick, Stacey?
Oh, yes. I love honey and sea salt. It helps tremendously. It's a shock how well it helps sometimes.
Yeah, it's
Because it's so
shocking.
simple.
It is
So
so
simple.
simple. So simple. And
Yeah.
this is why not a lot of doctors know about this, because my master's degree is in nutrition and this is food. So we're talking about food here, and doctors, bless their hearts, they only have to take one course in nutrition. And it's the basic, drink water, eat protein, eat carbs course that basically is the food pyramid that's out of date. So unless they choose to take courses on their own, it's bare minimum. And this is why when I got into my master's degree, I was shocked at the things I was learning about the thyroid and the adrenals, because it's categorized in nutrition education, because they are so deeply impacted by nutrition. So therefore, we're going to file them over here with nutrition. So yes, simple balance of electrolytes. This is also why so many people are benefiting from these products on the market right now. I'm going to call out Element, LMNT. I love that. It's an electrolyte drink and it's basically salt. So it is exactly that. It's sea salt. You put it in your water. It replenishes what your adrenals are peeing out, or what your adrenals are telling your kidneys to pee out. In doing that, it then helps you utilize your thyroid hormones better. So that's one commercial product. There's also one called Relight. There's lots of electrolyte drinks on the market right now, but if you read the ingredients, it's just sodium. It's just sea salt. So you're welcome to try those, of course, with consent of your doctor. Or you can try these things at home. Just very, very simple test with sea salt to help regulate those electrolytes and help hormones get into the cells.
So Brianna has a question. What about CMOS, or does that fall into the supplements that you weren't going to mention? I've heard it can be good for thyroid symptoms.
Thank you for that. CMOS is different than sea salt. CMOS is very high in iodine, and it can be a huge help for some people or a massive backfire. I don't recommend CMOS generally to women with Hashimoto's because the iodine in it can create an immune response to the thyroid tissue. So within the thyroid tissue, we're using iodine to make hormone. But in autoimmune cases, if we throw in a bunch of iodine, the immune system's going to say, whoa, hey, no, something's wrong here. And then it can trigger that attack on the thyroid tissue. So it's in the same category of why I don't like iodized sea salt, because the immune system can get really aggravated by that. So CMOS, I don't recommend that for Hashimoto's or autoimmune cases. Great stuff. Not for autoimmune.
Yeah. We have a comment. So funny. I did not know any of issues when I was a kid, but I love to lick my finger or hand and sprinkle salt on it and then lick it again. And I think I did that as well.
Yes. I also, as a child with thyroid issues, wanted salt all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny story about me is I would take the sticks of salted butter and I would go under the table and just eat them. And it was the salt. It was the salt that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I mean,
Yeah.
I love butter. Who doesn't love butter?
Who doesn't love butter? Yeah.
Who doesn't love butter?
I love butter.
Yeah, but it was the salt of it, because if you give me a cube of unsalted butter,
No.
We're not snacking on that.
No. and truthfully, we don't recommend snacking on sticks of butter. So just
thank you.
Put that out there.
No. But butter's great. If it's grass-fed, raw, high in vitamin A butter, pack that in your purse.
Yeah. Oh, and that goes along with our next comment. I've heard raw dairy or dairy in general is good for the thyroid. My iodine levels are low, but I react badly to iodine. Should I take something like kelp? Why would I react badly to iodine if it's low?
Yes, there you go. So that's, again, autoimmune. So the sister that wrote that, do you have an autoimmune diagnosis? I'd be interested. For the same reasons I just explained, that the immune system can be really upset when we throw in iodine. Another thing we often see is if vitamin A levels are low, that will impact your ability to absorb and utilize iodine. And that's true for a lot of our sisters, because vitamin A is in foods that we don't eat often, like cod liver oil and beef liver and sardines and ocean foods. However, raw dairy is a very good source of vitamin A. So I am the biggest fan in the world of raw dairy. If you're able to get it, it's unfortunately illegal or really hard to get in a lot of states. California, I mean, it's like $18, $19 a gallon for raw milk. It's insane. But yes, raw milk can be very good for its vitamin A, it's got bioavailable calcium, it's got enzymes, bacteria. It does also have iodine, but the iodine within there is what the cows ate and converted. So it can be a good source of iodine. In fact, raw cheese is probably my favorite source of iodine. I would choose that over Irish sea moss any day, because it comes with all of those other nutrients to help actually absorb the iodine. The other thing, I mean, my master's is in traditional nutrition. So we like to look at traditionally how we as a people were able to absorb our nutrients. And CMOS might be local to where your genetics come from. We also like to look at, where did your family come from? What was the foods that you traditionally ate? Because our gut doesn't evolve that quickly. Our gut is able to digest things that our ancestors ate where our ancestors lived. But CMOS, of course, there are some people that ate sea vegetables and ate CMOS. For my own genetic heritage, that's not true for my family. For me, we're Swedish descent, European descent. That was more of the raw milk type of iodine. That was more of the animal-based foods that my gut is very capable of digesting, because those are the things that we ate. So that's another piece to consider when we're looking at food is what did we eat traditionally? What worked for us? How did we evolve to this point? And are we able to digest those foods?
Yeah. And so Jessica said she has no diagnosis, but had a positive high ANA, but they said it was inflammation.
Yeah, very good. We see a lot of sisters with positive ANA, and that can be very scary, because if you get a test back with ANA, it will have all these scary diagnoses, including lupus, listed that are possibilities. The ANA just tells us your immune system is upset. So yes, it can be from inflammation. Hashimoto's is highly correlated with a positive ANA. We have a lot of sisters come into our program with a positive ANA, exit with a negative ANA. So I'm never inflamed when I see that. You do need to follow up on it. You do need to be working with a doctor, absolutely. But if we see a positive ANA and then we get testing and we see that you've got all these imbalances in your gut, you've got yeast and mold and you've got bacteria, now we know why. So we can get that under control. And that's usually where we see those tests turn negative, which is exciting.
Yeah. Here's a great question that we deal with quite a bit. Brianna asks, what about low vitamin D and B? I always test really low on those two.
My favorites.
Yep.
Okay, so that's very common with thyroid issues. And thank you for this question. Low vitamin D, we see for a variety of reasons, but one that I see most commonly is because of mold. So mold, if you have mold exposure, being that you've lived in a water damaged space or that you are a human in the world of water damaged spaces, which offices, churches, schools are notorious for water damage, by the way. I think I would love to see a research study to see if any of us made it through the public school system without being exposed to mold, because mold grows in water damaged spaces and it's impossible to get that many children together without spills that don't get cleaned up appropriately or leaks in the roof or, you know, all the things. Anyway, tangent. So mold exposure, and that will hijack vitamin D. So that will decrease your ability to make vitamin D and your ability to absorb vitamin D. That's just one pathway that we see, but I see that highly correlated with thyroid issues because mold also hijacks your ability to make thyroid hormones. So if you've got low vitamin D and low thyroid hormones, very high possibility that's going on. The low B vitamins we see frequently, and that has to do with your gut. So B vitamins, specifically vitamin B12, is made in the gut and it's made from good bacteria. So if you don't have enough good bacteria because you've got a lot of these pathogens going on, it's going to deplete your B vitamin production. So a gut issue. It all comes back to the gut. When we see low B, low D, low thyroid, we've got to see what's going on in the gut. Great question. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Our next question, could adrenal dysfunction, gut issues be causing the heaviness, sadness I felt for at least a year? It doesn't seem to be situational.
Absolutely. And I'm sending you love. Thank you for asking that question. I know I've been through periods of that. You too, Stacey?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Where it's like, my life is okay. Things are not stressful. My body's okay. My labs are fine, but I can't shake this heaviness and this sadness. And therapy's not getting me out of it. And meditation's not getting me out of it. And I'm doing all the things, but I'm not stepping out of it. Absolutely. That can be, yes. And the testing we use, there's one specific test the test we use has 75 markers, but there's one specific marker that I love looking at. And it's looking at how you're able to convert your neurotransmitters. Because we see in cases like yours, and I'm a case like this, if you're not able to convert your neurotransmitters into adrenal supporting hormones, you're going to have that heaviness and you're going to have that depression, and it's going to inhibit your liver detox rate and it's going to impact your gut. So they're all tied together, but with the testing, we can zone in and say, oh, this is the step that's broken. And for some of our sisters, that's just simple supplements. We just need to see what the problem is. So yes, I resonate with that. I've experienced that. And for me, it was doing the testing and finding the specific break in a specific enzyme that needed a specific nutrient that I wasn't taking. We add that back in and everything brightens up.
Yeah. So Brianna said, I do have hypothyroid, but there is a concern that I have Hashimoto's. The doctor says I don't, but there are factors showing possible Hashimoto's.
Yes. And in cases like that, you know, Hashimoto's can take a long time to diagnose. And it's because, number one, doctors refuse to test. I don't know why they won't test antibodies. Number two, those antibodies can creep up. So people will be negative for antibodies, and then a couple months later, they'll have in the hundreds. And if you're not testing, you can't catch that. Also, the range on the antibodies can vary by the lab. But if there are antibodies there, it's a clue that your immune system has activated against thyroid tissue. The test is helpful because it tells us that, but it still doesn't tell us why. So I like having those blood tests. I love having the information of the diagnosis, but I still want to know why. And that's why we do deeper testing with the organic acids test, so we can see why. Why is
Yeah.
your immune system upset? Why is it doing this?
Right. So we have a question from Deanne. Never heard of ANA. I test low for those two and now supplement. I'm assuming the A and the D and the B. My practitioner suspects I have mold. I do work on a college campus.
Ah,
I'm worried to pursue because it seems to be so costly to repair and complicated to heal. Your thoughts?
yes. I will just nod my head.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
and if you get into the mold rabbit hole on Instagram, please don't get into the mold rabbit hole on
Don't go
Instagram.
there. Don't go there.
Oh man, I spent a lot of time in that hole when I was doing my trainings in mold remediation and mold toxicity. It's a it's a scary place because a lot of people tell you that, yeah, you have to leave your job and you have to move out of your house and then you have to burn your house down, right? Like you have to
Yeah.
get rid of this mold. It's not reasonable for a lot of people. And so I see that being a stop. And even in my own mindset, that was a stop because I tested positive for mold. I live in a 1928 house.
Mhm.
We still haven't gotten to the bottom of where this is coming from. I know it's here, but it's costly, it's expensive, and I can't move. So I resonate with people who are in this situation, and we have a lot of clients in this identical situation.
Mhm.
Can you still heal? Yes, absolutely. And to every woman who is thinking, I'm going to have to leave my house or my job before I can get better, I invite you to question that thought and to stop and say, oh, hang on, is that true? Social media will tell you that's true. But my experience, and Stacey, do you agree in our experience? No.
Yes.
It's always better to find solutions and to work on what you can. The things you can control, that's what I want to focus on. There's always going to be things outside of our control. So to give you a really good example, we had a sister in the program who had the highest mold levels that we've ever seen. And she lived in a really moldy home with a visible mold and wasn't able to remediate it. So we got her on a program and we used some very specific binders, which means it binds up the mold that she's exposed to. She had a massive turnaround. And because of the situation she's in, she'll continue to take those binders and continue to do the things to make sure, like nasal rinses and making sure that she's doing daily care for her body, to ensure that the environment that she's in does not impact her as poorly as it could. But she's reclaimed her life. And we see that happen. But her big stop for a long time was, I don't even know if I should do this because I can't fix my home. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I had this some experience. I was really moldy. My gut was really moldy. And still I live in a house. I know there's mold. And, I was great after 3 months. I had felt like a new person once I did my personal protocol on your program.
yeah.
So even living in a moldy house. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, in the ideal situation, we do want people to
mhm.
remediate. We want them to say the word correctly. We want people to address the mold, and ideally, we want people to live out of mold. Absolutely, I understand it's not possible for everyone. So, Dr. Jill Krista, she's one of my mentors. I love her. If you want a good follow on Instagram, Dr. Jill Krista is great, and she talks a lot about this. Like, what if you can't move? What do you do? And I look at this in the same way I look at everything in our lives, that there are things we can't control and there are things that we can. Even in our homes and families, we live with people that are not leaving. We
Mhm.
live with people that are going to be there, and we have personalities and we have coworkers and we have relationships that are really hard, and we can't just walk away from them all the time. So we learn to deal with them and we learn how to thrive within them and we learn how to build resiliency. That's what we're talking about your body doing. The exact same thing. And yes, there's always a right time to heal. It's now. Now's the right
Yeah,
time to heal.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thanks for
Jessica
that.
asked, why would one feel bad taking vitamin D with low vitamin D showing up?
That can be related to poor absorption. Also, would you be willing to say, Jessica, did they put you on the massive dose of vitamin D? Because I see this happen a lot where people are low in vitamin D and they'll give them like 50,000 units. Like once a week, we're going to have you take 50,000 units. Oftentimes, that is the not converted form of vitamin D, it's the precursor to it. It requires gallbladder action. And the thing that gets me so worked up is when, and I didn't mention this, not having a gallbladder is another reason that you'll be low in vitamin D. So a lot of our sisters with thyroid issues lose their gallbladder because that's also related to toxicity in the gut. So they lose their gallbladder. Now they're not absorbing vitamin D. And now the doctor gives them 50,000 units once a week. Well, you need bile to absorb the vitamin D. And then if you're not able to convert the form they gave you, it won't be absorbed. The levels won't be influenced. So we see that happen a lot. But to answer your question, if it's not a massive dose, that goes back to the gallbladder and the bile. And if
Yeah.
if you've got inflammation in your gut, if you've got infection, if you've got poor bile flow, you can take vitamin D and it may not be effective at all.
Yeah. She said she refused the 50,000, just taking the 5,000. I suspect my gallbladder is having an issue.
There we go. You nailed
That
it.
makes sense. Yeah.
People already know. I think that's
Yeah.
what's incredible is like in my job, I just explain things and people are like, that's what I thought. And it's like, yes, you were right. You
Yeah.
thought right.
Yeah.
You
Because
know
you know your body.
Yes, you know
Yes.
your body. And so many of us have spent so many years being told that what we're experiencing didn't happen. We call that the gaslighting now, right?
Yes.
And we start to doubt our own intuition. I'm here to tell you, your intuition is right. You know your body. And even down to the sisters at the front of this call that said, it feels like my diaphragm is weak. Yes, you're right. You're
Yeah.
right. So use your intuition to guide you to the next step. And we would love to help you if you are ready to take that additional step to uncover what exactly is going on. We would love to help you. So the Healthy Thyroid System is my 4-month program that includes this testing we've been talking about. It includes the organic acids test. We also do a bioenergetic hair scan, which helps us put together a lot of this information, looks at minerals, looks at the adrenals. We're going to put together a full picture of what's going on. And then I put together a personalized protocol to help you walk away from these symptoms. So, like I said, I don't give out recommendations because I've been doing this now. We've done over 1,000 tests and I've never made the same protocol twice. There are no two tests that come back identical. So there's no two protocols. And I don't believe in cookie cutter protocols. So I often get questions like, well, what do you do for mold? And what do you do for parasites? What do you do for bacteria? It depends on the person and it depends on the protocol. So we do personalized to you so that we can fix the things that are broken down to the specific step, like we were talking about earlier, the specific step that needs to be addressed. So if you want help with that, we'd love to help you. How you move forward is you go to the thyroidhotline.com and there is a little button there to apply for a call with my team. And we'll talk more about your case, talk about what's going on with you, and then talk about steps to move forward. So if you are ready, we are ready to help you. Come on in. Let's get some testing, get some solutions.
Definitely. I want to thank all these ladies. Thank you so much for your questions. We love answering your questions. And we are so grateful that, especially you, Deanne, you said thank you, feel encouraged. We hope that we encouraged you, that you can heal.
Yes.
And we would love for you to join us.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being amazing. We applaud you for the work that you're doing. Continue to be intuitive, continue to seek out answers. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Have a happy day.
Thank you.